Welcome everyone back. For those of you that were with us just before in the previous session, we had such a wonderful time learning from the businesses themselves or those working with businesses on what it really takes to be able to build a modern slavery statement and everything that goes behind in trying to collect this data and some of the challenges, but also opportunities in doing so. And as a natural progression from that, we have this incredible session now where we will dive into the complex task of assessing those statements. And throughout the last 2 days, you've learned from the government, you've learned from different institutions or practitioners who are developing the modern slavery statements, or they're trying to assess them on what they are interested to see as a potential user from your particular solutions that you're going to build here. But in these particular sessions, we're going to go a little more deeper into particular methodologies that we can apply to be able to do this assessment. And we've heard many times already that looking at one individual statement is great. We know about this company, we can engage with it as a consumer or investor, but we need to move at creating this larger scale vision by assessing companies together and having those statistics by industries or by different metadata points that we have collected in this registry. And the expert panels that we have today, they're doing exactly this. They've been looking at those modern slavery statements using different methodologies and different benchmarks, and they're here today to share with you some of the way they're building the methodologies and also some of the findings that they have collected over running this assessment for so many years. And before we commence, I would like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we can dive straight into the session. So Vaso, I would like to invite you first, and then maybe you can pick another panelist to follow you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Adriana. Hello, everyone. My name is Vasiliki Gkatziaki. I'm a data engineer with WikiRate International. It's a small organization based in Berlin, and we are building an open data platform that collects environmental, social, and governance data about companies. And since 2016, we are collaborating also with Walk-Free assessing modern slavery statements. And I think I will pass it to Hannah.
Yes, I'm Thinyane. I am the Director of Supply Chain Technology, Research and Development at Thinyane. In this panel, I'm sharing about work I did with Adriana. Oops, QA. I will.
Hi, can everyone hear me clearly? Yes, I think my internet was a bit patchy for a while. My name is Nga. I'm an associate professor at Monash University. I have been working on a project that look at the disclosure quality of modern slavery statements of ASX 100 companies for the last 4 years. So we started the project in 2020, and we have been reviewing the quality of the statements of ASX 100 companies for the last 4 reporting rounds. So today I will be sharing information about the framework that we use, maybe the some of the overview high-level findings that we have, and I look forward to sharing that with you. So Mahmoud, can I please come to you next?
Thanks. I'm Mahmoud Gada. I'm an associate professor at Lancaster University Management School. I study corporate reporting in general, and part of which is the modern slavery reporting. And I'm going to give a quick flavor of what we have been doing today. Thanks. Sebastian, who's Juan?
Thank you. Sebastian and Joanne
Okay.
are part of the organizing team, and I think by this point the participants are very familiar with them. But once
Okay,
again, just want to mention this also in front of all the participants. It is 3 in the morning in Colombia, and Joan and Sebastian are still with us. So thank you so much for all your support and for also being able to be a DJ at so early in the morning. It's really great. But thank you, the panelists, for being here today, and I'm excited to learn from you. And we were also expecting, as you probably saw in before this session, to have Pierre from the Attorney General's Department, but luckily we were able to have him and representatives also from Canada and the UK in a special session early this morning, going in detail about the 3 modern slavery acts, and Pierre shared then with us the way that the government is assessing this statement. So of course we have this law, they're asking us to publish this modern slavery statement, and the governments do have an interest in assessing them, at least for the compliance as described in the law. And now with this template that we have learned about today, providing guidance to businesses on how to move beyond compliance to showcase good practices. So we've already learned the government's perspective, but with us today we have some fantastic researchers and civic society representatives showing us how they are analyzing the modern slavery statements and what they're finding. So Vasu, I'll start with you because we just jumped up from a call where Laureen from Wikirate was there, and she provided us with a lot of insights on Wikirate's work. But she did say that she won't go into the findings of all these years of assessing modern slavery statement and leave it to you. So would you mind sharing a bit more about your work and also what are you are seeing from all these years at Wikirate working with the modern slavery statements, and particularly if you have any learnings or any particular findings that you think the participants should learn about. Vaso, to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know, I've presented a small presentation. I don't know if I have the chance to share my screen. Is it
That'd be
possible?
great. We can
Great. I'm afraid there might be some overlap with what Lorraine presented this morning, so please let me know if there is something redundant and I can just skip. Yeah, today I'll be talking about the Beyond Compliance project, and I will introduce the work that we do at Wikirate in collaboration with WalkFree on how we assess modern slavery statements. I think it is already addressed in previous conversations. The modern slavery remains a significant issue affecting millions of people. And so what we can do about that is that we need strong legislation that protects all workers and hold companies accountable. And companies must ensure supply chain transparency, meaning they need to identify, disclose, and address modern slavery risks. So the UK and Australian Modern Slavery Acts were among the first laws specifically addressing modern slavery. These laws require companies above certain revenue thresholds to produce annual modern slavery statements. The goal is to increase transparency and accountability in supply chains. And beyond these 2 modern slavery acts, we also have laws like the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, the Californian Transparency in Supply Chains Act, etc. And each of these laws aim to push companies towards greater responsibility when it comes to addressing forced labor and human rights abuses. So while these laws require companies to report on modern slavery, the real question is, are companies doing the bare minimum, or are they actually taking meaningful action, and even if they're going beyond compliance or their reporting? Since 2016, as I mentioned also earlier, we are collaborating with WalkFree, and we have been working together to analyze statements under the UK and Australia law using 21 key criteria. So far, we have assessed over 2,000 statements, providing valuable insights into corporate transparency and accountability. So the research question that we wanted to answer in a nutshell was, are companies treating modern slavery reporting as box-ticking exercise, or are they genuinely working towards meaningful improvements and going beyond compliance. And I want to give a little bit of some insights of how do we do it. And to answer this question, we take an open and community-driven research approach. So at Wikirate, we built an open data platform where corporate environmental, social, and governance data is collected, analyzed, and made accessible to everyone. Our goal is to provide free and comparable and transparent data to empower accountability. So now I want to dive a little bit deeper of how we go from raw statements to open data. And yeah, we are taking an open and collaborative approach. As a first step, we collect modern slavery statements from the UK and Australian registries. Then on the step 2, we try to clean the data, removing possible duplicates, taking metadata like company names, company numbers, and we assign reporting year to statements based on a specific methodology. And once prepared, the statements are linked to company profiles and uploaded to the Wikirate platform. On step 3 is where our community comes in. We are collaborating with a global community of volunteers. We assess statements using these 24 criteria that has been translated to accessible metrics that simplify complex topics. We describe the methodology in detail and step-by-step guidance of what researchers should look into the statements and how this can translate it to answers to specific questions. The data itself is open too. Anyone can explore, download, and reuse it. This openness is key to building trust and enabling collaboration. And as a final step, these open data feed into our Beyond Compliance dashboard, where we can analyze trends across thousands of statements. And the insights are used by researchers, WOC3 as well, advocacy groups, and policymakers to push for stronger legislation and better corporate practices. So this open pipeline from collection to impact is what makes such analysis and change possible, is what we think at least. I want to dive a little bit deeper on some details of the Wikirate platform. So we have all this research from volunteers are translated to research metrics, but research metrics are actually the foundational building blocks for analysis on the platform. And on top of that, we also support calculated metrics that they build on these research metrics to automatically generate new insights, enable further analysis in a transparent and consistent way. So from how we are going from raw disclosures to comparable metrics, raw company disclosures are first assessed by volunteers against these 21 selected criteria, including the legal requirements of its Modern Slavery Act. And these assessments feed into calculated metrics that automatically answering additional questions. For example, whether the company meets the minimum requirements of the Australian Modern Slavery Act and the UK Modern Slavery Act. The metric then powers our benchmarking, enabling us to compare companies and sectors and transform raw disclosures into actionable insights. So the data, we hope that the data, the insights from this research actually aren't just numbers. They drive real world change. So we build data dashboards for researchers, policymakers, and businesses, and then we advocate for stronger modern slavery regulations and encourage companies to improve their practices. So I don't know if I have much time, but I want now to give a short overview of the dashboard. The Beyond Compliance dashboard.
Take as much time as you like. And I think the dashboard will be so important for them to visualize how to present all this data. So please take as much time as you like.
Great. So just a side note, I just realized this morning that there was an issue with this chart here. So I restrict the view on electronics just to showcase this chart as well. If I go to all sectors, you see there is some issue here. I just want to be transparent that, yeah, it seems a bit funny. I don't know. I will have to figure out what's wrong there a bit later. But yeah, in its research cycle, we usually focus on a specific sector. At the moment, we have research the sector of companies that belong on sectors of electronics, finance, food and beverage, garment, hospitality, and energy. So in this specific view, we see the results from the electronics sector. There is the reality is, and this is an overall an overall result that we have outcome that there is an underreporting of cases of exploitation. We see only from the research that we've done, only 60% of companies that we have assessed reporting finding incidents in their supply chains. And this seems to be underrepresented based on the statistics that we have on how many million people are actually in forced labor at the moment. Yeah, we can see specifically then how this 14%, but in this case, on the electronic sector, that 38% is broken down to modern slavery incidents, wages and benefits, freedom of movement, working conditions, other incidents, excessive hours, recruitment fees. So some categories that they are actually fall under the forced labor. And then some key findings. So 66% of companies do not meet the minimum requirements of the UK and Australia legislation. So this is a big gap. And then only 40% of the statements disclose no information on their supply chain. And 69% of the statements do not disclose direct worker remediation policies, such as policies prioritize the well-being, rights, and dignity of affected workers. We have also some spotlight metrics. So only 30% of the statements provided a commitment on or detailed action to ensure fair living wages in at least some parts of their supply chain. Low and underpayment of wages are an indicator of forced labor. And yeah, I just want to go to the breakdown of the meeting minimum requirements, specifically on the electronic sector. On the statements that we have assessed, we've seen that only 31% of the statements that they fall under the UK Modern Slavery Act met the minimum requirements of the UK Modern Slavery Act, and only 20% on the Australian Act. If we go to the overall statistics, we see the percentages are not changing as much. So again, we have only a small percentage of statements actually meeting the minimum requirements on both legislations. But yeah, we have also some statistics around going beyond compliance, and we have its metric that people can, yeah, and I invite you to further browse these metrics and yeah, see how companies perform in these aspects as well. Yeah, I'm not going to go deeper here. I don't know if there are any questions at this point, or yeah.
Well, actually, if you don't mind me going a bit off script here.
Yeah,
For tomorrow's session, for the workshop on visualization and application of the software one, we've really been looking for a good demo on how to present high-level statistics. And this is it. I don't know how I didn't click before, but this is exactly what we would like to showcase as a good example to the participants. So thank you for sharing this. We will make sure to ask them to come back to this. And I will have some more questions regarding this particular way of visualizing data and how to make that data available to users. So maybe in the Q&A, if you don't mind me, Vasu, I'll come back with quite a few different questions that I hope that participants from tomorrow workshop will be able to come back to this recording and watch. So thank you for this. is so now we've seen how a non-for-profit, a civic society organization has been taking on their own hands this very complex challenge of collecting data, like we learned from Lorraine, but also analyzing data, building this platform, having data engineers like Vaso helping put all this data together and all the assessment and creating these important visualizations that then users can make use of in creating advocacy or other projects. So now I would like to invite two exceptional academics who have been influencing this space for a very long time. We have one from here from Australia and one from the UK working with the Australian modern slavery statements and the UK one. So maybe I'll start with you, Na, if you don't mind. Your work at the Monash University has been one of the most cited work in this field, and one that particularly investors are paying a lot of attention to, and they cannot wait for you to put again your annual assessment of the statements. And would you mind telling us a little bit more about how are you scoring the modern slavery statements and what are your findings?
So give me a minute. I just want to check if I can share the slides. Can you all see? Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
we can see.
Okay,
Perfect.
thanks. I was a bit panicked because for some reason my screen was frozen for
Oh no,
a few
works
minutes
perfectly
when Vasi was presenting. So but I managed to restart the computer and just logged in. Well, thank you, Adriana, for the wonderful introduction of the research. So I'm presenting on behalf of my team today. We have another two researchers with us. And perhaps I would, yes, you do mention that investors are paying a lot of attention to this, and they were actually also the one who inspired us to do this project. So back in 2020, we had a few meetings with some large institutional investors, and we asked them, what was the main emerging areas that they wanted to know about, where our research could add value. And at that time, one of the recommendations was to look at the new Modern Slavery Act in Australia. What does that mean for companies? What does that mean for investors? And we started the research, and the first point of kind of reference was to pick up some of the modern slavery statements. Right, this is after the first round of reporting, to understand how company actually responds to the reporting requirement. And to our surprise, at that time, we looked at a few examples. Some of them were really good, and some of them was just longer than one page, just one page. So if you can imagine that this is a huge reporting requirement, and we are not looking at smaller companies, we are looking at ASX 100s. That means they are one out of the largest companies listed in Australia. And the modern slavery statement, and this is from the first year, was one page. And half of that page was about what the company is and what they're producing, more commercial information than, the real information. So that motivated us to say that, yes, you have a very clear guidance from the Act, but then somehow companies are not putting the same resources into preparing the statements and preparing or ensuring that the disclosures were effective. So we say that, yes, we can learn from the guidance document of the Act. We can learn from the best examples in the market at that time and developed a framework. So I'll be going into the framework. But first, let me perhaps remind you of the key reporting criteria of the Act, of the Australian Act. And we have 7 criteria. And with these 7 criteria, there are very specific guidance in the guidance document for reporting entities. So we adopt this framework with the 7 criteria. And we also look at the detailed guidance document of the Act. And what we do was to develop a scoring system for that. Now, how do we score? And with the objective of the project is to be able to build a trusted industry benchmark for disclosure quality. And I think to some extent, after 4 years of doing that, it has gained some trust among companies and also investors as well. How we do it. So annually, what we do is to collect the statement from the Modern Slavery Register, or from the company's website, because sometimes the statements come when I think that the statements are available only 6 weeks or 7 weeks on the register after the company submits the statement to the register. So sometimes under the pressure of time, we want to just get access to the statements first, rather than waiting for the statements to be available on the register. So we do look at companies' websites. We are scoring according to our framework that I'm going to explain that in a minute. And then we base on the total score, we give them a rating. And we track the rating over the years. So this is our scoring framework. We based on the 7 criteria, because the 7 criteria is about other information, so we kind of map that into 5 categories of disclosure. And we give them weighting, and we have a list of questions under each of these category of disclosure. But basically, the way that we developed the framework is to look at, in each of these category of disclosure, what should be the items, what should be the information that companies should have in their statement. And this is largely informed by the guidance document of the Act and the best practice examples that we see. Now, so the first category is about the structure and the operations of the companies, and also the structure and operations of the statement. So we looked at, for example, word count. We normally get asked, why do we think that word count is an important information, or one important indicator for our scoring? But this is based on our white paper, which we published in 2021. We did see there is a very strong correlation between the word count of the statement and the quality. Well, so it's not totally linear, but it means that up to a certain level, it doesn't mean that the more words that you have, but it kind of plateau up to a certain level. But we do understand that, a statement shouldn't be too short, and there should be some kind of an optimal length for the statement. So we do have one small question. So I think this one is about 2 points out of 100 points, which is about word count. And we have questions about how they disclose the organization structure. Just give you an example. If some companies in the statement, they might say, oh, we have a list of subsidiaries, but if you want to see the subsidiaries list, please go to the website, or please go to the annual report. So we would not give them the score for that, because we would think that perhaps it would be more sensible for the companies to mention to be very transparent about what the subsidiaries are, who are being covered by the statements. And then other indicators for category 1 is about whether they talk about the site, the major site, the locations, because some companies have global offices and some don't, and where they are based also tells you about whether they have any exposure to risk in their operations as well. The employees and the number of employees, or the type of employees, we have seen more companies talk about the type of employees that they have, or how many fixed term or permanent or casual or temporary staff that they have. All of that are quite important, because we understand that some employees are more vulnerable to being exploited than other group of employees. So we look at key inputs in terms of what are the key procurement items, what companies buy for in the supply chain, for example, and then the consultation process among the affiliated entities or other entities covered in the statement. So that category number 1. Category number 2 is about the disclosure of the supply chains. So with these category, we think that the disclosure would be effective if it tells the reader of the statement, it let the reader understand the complexity of the supply chains and the scale of the supply chains. So, for example, we say it would be good for the statement to tell the audience the number of suppliers. Because if you have 2,000 suppliers, would it be different from companies like Woolworths or Coles having more than 20,000 suppliers? Right? So that tells you the scale of the supply chains of the company. And then the next information is to understand where your suppliers are. So the more the better you can understand where your suppliers are, and the other information about your suppliers, the better you can manage the risk. That's why at the beginning, this is at the basic level, the company needs to know where their suppliers are located. And especially if the suppliers are located in some of the high risk region. So that's why we have an indicator looking at whether the company disclose where the suppliers are. And companies have been being very, more comprehensive with the disclosure of supply chains. They are getting more comprehensive nowadays. So instead of just telling or disclosing where the suppliers are, some companies would actually talk about, the risk of the locations, maybe based on the global slavery index of work free. So they would have a kind of a heat map and based on the number, based on the location of the suppliers as well. We also look at to see whether the companies talk about, whether they understand the tier 1 or beyond tier 1 suppliers. We also look at total supply spend in dollars, because we understand, according to many statements, if a lot of the supply spend, or the majority of the supply spend, goes into a very certain risky location, then that company would have a lot more exposure to that risk stemming from that region than, if you just have a very small economic exposure to that region. So we also look at supply spend by country or supply spend by category. So how much money do you spend? Basically, the question is about how much money do you spend, where the money goes, or for what type of goods and services. So category 3, for example, and Adriana, please stop me if I'm taking too long on this, because I can always go back to the framework in the Q&A. All right, so let me continue. With category 3, we're looking at the disclosure of risk. So expertise, for example, here we have 2 questions. We have questions about what is a team that is doing this? Basically, is there a working group, a modern slavery working group, representing different functions, different departments, for example, different entities. And then is there, does the company talk about using any, external, it could be paid, or it could be non-paid, because there are many other resources that the company can utilize to understand their risk. So we look at the risk assessment model. Typically, we would like to see the companies talk about, what are the inputs, what is the process of assessing this, and what is the output. So the input would be, they look at a set of indicators, they have some certain databases that they analyze, or they monitor controversy, for example. So that would be the inputs that they use for the risk analysis. And risk and the process of doing that. So some companies may talk about they're having a weighting system. They have a system to filter out the risky suppliers, or to be more targeted at some group of suppliers, so that we have to understand their process of doing this. And then the outcome for risk assessment would be, is there a risk rating system? Do they classify suppliers into high, low, medium risk, for example? And then that also links to the due diligence part, because due diligence typically focus on, what the level of risk of your suppliers. So that's the level of details that we go into when we analyze those statements. And then we look at whether the company actually come up with their own assessment of risk. Do they talk about, or do they really understand they have high, low, medium risk exposure, or do they understand that they have different exposures to different business activities, for example? And quite important, we want to understand that if they talk about some risk, Do they think that, do they understand, are they potentially causing that risk? Are they potentially contributing to that risk, or are they linked to that risk? And if yes, then what is the link? And this is where the statement is, many statements are very weak on this area. I mean, the statement can mention the risk, but some of them just ignore the analysis of how they can be related to that risk. And then the last item on risk is when we look at whether the statements show a very specific understanding and approach when it comes to risk management. A lot of the time you might see that statements have very general information about modern slavery. So they talk about modern slavery risk, but they don't go into the specific types of exploitation that is more relevant to their company. So maybe your company might be more exposed to the risk of forced labor or child labor or deceptive recruitment, right? So we really want to see the evidence that the companies go beyond that, you know, umbrella modern slavery term and go into very specific concepts of or types of exploitation under that. In category 4, we look at due diligence and remediation processes. And so we know that Australia just finished one consultation in which the AGD was thinking about whether we should have, you know, specific requirements on due diligence and remediations. And that's why in our framework, right from the beginning, we separate due diligence and remediation and make them as one key pillar, because we look at whether there is a description of due diligence process. And the process here, we look at three different things, a few different things. So we look at whether there is governance structure and process around this. We also look at what the companies say about screening potential suppliers, onboarding new suppliers, and monitoring existing suppliers. Right, so those are the key due diligence. And in terms of monitoring, it's about whether the companies have, for example, embedded a modern slavery related clause into their contract with the suppliers. Okay. Remediation process is the same. We look at a few indicators underneath that. So we look at if there is a discussion of process, if then the process for further investigation under remediation. And then other questions about policies, how do they assess suppliers, and whether they have training. And training, we look at employees training, suppliers engagement or training as well. And the last pillar is about assessing effectiveness. Here we look at the disclosure of who is in charge of monitoring this, how and how often do they do what they say they do, and what do they say they do when they talk about monitoring this. Is it about reviewing a certain policy? Is it about assessing, you know, certain KPIs, for example? And we also talk about, look at the information about collaboration with external parties to leverage shared resources to improve their own learning journey, for example. And there's also a score for having very specific examples or case studies in the statements, right? So feel free to stop me at any time if you have any question about this in details. But based on that framework, and I also want to point you out to the first and the second piece of research that we have here. One is a research brief on ASX 100, and the other one is on ASX 300. So the 300 paper is a white paper, and we have all the detailed questions there. The question that we use to score, and the points, the point system are located to each of the questions there as well. So I would recommend, if you are interested, having another look at the white paper. So I just want to share with you some high-level findings that we had from the review last year. We are working on the review this year, so we haven't got the information for this year yet, but this is for last year. So for last year, we reviewed 112 statements. They all belong to ASX 100 companies. So you might question, okay, 100 companies, why do we have 112 companies? Because we like to keep the companies in our coverage for at least 3 years. So even if some companies have fall off the ASX 100, we still keep them for another 2 years for continuity. So you can see that this is the level of transparency that we have. Every year we came out with this. We have the tickers of the companies, and this is what the companies would look for. When we release the report, they would try to find where the tickers are and then try to see where they are. But also they look for comparisons with their peers. And we also talk about what companies were downgraded, where the companies are, and some companies are downgraded. This is a progress that we have seen over the last 4 years or 4 reporting rounds. So if you look at the green bars, so you can see that the green bars have been increasing, which is a very good sign. We have to say that our observation here is so biased toward the very large organizations. So we would not see the same thing with ASX 300. We would not see the same thing with our ordinary index, for example. Or, if you look at the 4,000 organizations that have been submitting, we will not see this, right? These one are the really big companies in the market. They have a lot of resources to put in to have a very good statement or very good disclosure. So I will go back to this one in the Q&A as well, but this is our observation of what has improved and what has still, what are the areas for further improvement. So definitely we have seen, and this is our observation of ASX 100 companies, a lot better disclosures about organizations and structure, a lot more information about supply chains. Their risk disclosure has also been better, and we understand that they put a lot more investment of resources into understand risk, due diligence and remediation. So in the past, you may not find any statements that talk about audits and audit findings, but now you can see some statements really mention the specific findings from social audits or different type of audits that they have. And many companies now are disclosing their KPIs as well as the future action plan. But as I mentioned, there are some other further areas for improvement, especially how the companies understand their exposure. Are they costing? Are they contributing to? How are they linked to the risk? That is a very important area that we need to improve. The description of grievance and remediation processes are quite general. A lot of the time we don't know who is going to do what if an incident happens. And yeah, in terms of monitoring outcomes and impact, that will be instead of just looking at the activities and the KPI, what does that mean for the working environment of the workers in the company's operations and the company supply chains? So that will be the key focus of that. Yeah, okay. So I would like to stop here, and I have a few numbers in the appendix as well, if anyone wants to ask specifically about how ASX 100 companies are reporting on each of these questions that we have. But we understand that, I mean, at least this is our motivation, that when we continue to do this annual benchmarking review, we are contributing to driving continuous improvement of these ASX 100 companies.
Thank you very much, Na. And before I have a few remarks about your presentation, I just want to ask you if you can please explain to us in very simple terms, because I tried to Google it and it's using very technical terms. How would you describe ASX 100 to people that are not from Australia? What does it mean?
Oh, okay. Right. So ASX 100 refer to the group of 100 largest companies that are listed in Australia. And they are the top 100 in terms of size of the company, which is measured by market capitalization. So market capitalization meaning how many shares the company have issued and what is the share price. So if you times the two, so you would have the market cap of the company. So they are looking at the companies that are largest in the market, on the Australian market, based on market capitalizations. A similar version that you might find would be S&P 500. So that covers the top 500 companies that are listed in the US, and they are the top 500 in terms of market capitalization. So ASX 100 refer to that top companies in terms of size. Sorry, I should have explained that.
No,
And
that's good.
yeah, and the list change, because you can see that how sensitive that list is to the movement of the share price. So the list change. So every year we picked the constituent of the list from Bloomberg at the end of the reporting time, and we only look at those companies.
Perfect. No, thank you so much for explaining this, and also for going in depth in your presentation, because this is one of the case studies that we are showcasing here on how researchers like yourself took on the requirements of the law and the guidelines for businesses, and then all the knowledge from the civic society and all the research out there, and try to transform that into methodology that is consistent across different years. So you are able to assess the largest companies of Australia over a multiple years, so you can observe how reporting is progressed. And again, this is when you are looking at only 100 of the companies, but they are the biggest ones, so they have a lot of influence in the market. But now imagine taking this methodology that I and her colleagues have developed, and with the use of AI done properly, being able to scale it across all the different statements that are being published. And I think that's the aim here. It is to move beyond just checking for compliance, for checking for quality, and your methodology is one example on how to do that. And that's why I want to thank you for taking the time to explain to us on how you build that methodology, how you assess the statements, and some of their findings. Because in tomorrow's sessions, when we dive into the workshops, we're trying to explain to the participants that we want to see these high-level statistics if they're choosing to work on the visualization part. And we already saw from Vaso on how they are visualizing the results. We already saw from you on also some of the graphs and how important this information then is for the stakeholders. So we now have learned about a fantastic methodology of assessing the statements, particularly here in Australia, but we are also lucky enough to have Mahmoud with us today, who has also been assessing modern slavery statements for a very long time, but to bring it closer to what this competition is about, he has also done incredible work using machine learning and AI in doing that, and he will also be part of some of the workshops tomorrow, and hoping to see a little bit more of the technical and geeky part then. But today he's here to tell us a little bit more about the methodologies, the work, the finding, and then tomorrow just to give us excited for tomorrow when he's going to show us on how the app that they built actually works. So Mahmoud, to you.
Thanks, Adriana. Let me share my screen. Can you see it? Perfect.
Yes.
Thanks, Adriana. I mean, I'm conscious of time, so my kind of presentation will be a bit of kind of higher level, also given the excellent presentation made by Nai in the previous few minutes. So I'm going to present joint work with Steve Young, who was my colleague here at Lancaster. This work we have been doing over the past few years, but also I'm going to just give a quick discussion of what we are doing now, which will be kind of more relevant for tomorrow's session. Okay, so I'll step back a bit. I mean, given my specialty as a researcher in corporate disclosure, so I'll just step back kind of for a minute to discuss disclosure in general, why companies report information, and this might help us to put this into context. The idea is that companies are reporting information or disclosure not just for compliance, but to induce good behavior. The idea this is going to create, like in economic terms, what's called the positive externalities or positive real effects by companies. By increasing disclosures, investors and consumers become more aware or have more attention to the issues, and then they can hold companies accountable, leading to hopefully improved ESG, labor practice, sustainability, better governance, and so on. And we have evidence, for example, from research that mandatory reporting of mine safety information lead to increased mine safety performance. And ideally, this is what the regulators have in mind when regulators in the UK have imposed this Modern Slavery Act 2015, requiring companies to disclose information about how they are managing the risks of modern slavery in their business and supply chain. The idea was that companies would, while they produce this information, they make the investors and consumers will become more aware of the issue, and this will lead to better treatment of the problem. So, but unfortunately, the analysis we have done of some of these statements shows that the statements themselves were not useful. So we did work with the UK Financial Reporting Council. So the UK Financial Reporting Council is the main regulatory body in the UK that regulates corporate reporting, and the UK Anti-Slavery Commissioner. And this report is publicly available for those who are interested. And what we did in this report, we analyzed some of the largest companies in Financial Times stock exchange. We did some manual analysis of their modern slavery statements using Home Office guidance, as well as some criteria by the Business and Human Rights Resource Center. And like three main issues emerged. Similar to what my colleague has mentioned, that these reports tend to lack details. They don't provide enough detail that enables informed decisions. So companies tend to talk about higher level issues without providing details of the problem that enables informed decision. I think mostly for legal reasons. Second, companies have this kind of tick box approach, compliance oriented, backward looking. So companies tend to focus mostly backward looking on issues that happened in the past rather than future engagement with emerging issues. The most striking results we have is this poor connectivity with other disclosures. So annual report is just one part of companies' disclosure. So companies in the UK have this massive annual report of 200 pages, or maybe sometimes 300-400 pages, that discuss so many things about companies, including, for example, companies in the UK have to disclose what's called principal risks and uncertainties. And companies rarely view modern slavery as a principal risk. They rarely view it as a principal risk. They rarely discuss it in their business model issues. They rarely discuss, even if the companies work in industries where modern slavery is by default, it's there, they rarely discuss it in their risks, in their risk analysis. So we found there is poor connectivity. Companies rarely mention modern slavery in their annual reports. They rarely mention even the statement itself or provide link to the statement, as if these are kind of two separate issues. And this is one of the main highlights we made in a report that we made to the UK Parliament, evidence piece we made to the UK Parliament. It's also publicly available there. Similar results came from the analysis by CCLA Investment Management, was kind of similar insights, poor reporting by companies. And the idea is that this poor reporting hinders the ability to deal with the issue. Okay, moving a few steps ahead. So this analysis we did revealed that there are gaps, there are issues, but this is an analysis of 100 statements. And we know that modern slavery affects millions of people. And ideally, if we wanted to have a good oversight, we need to analyze thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of statements. And this is almost impossible to do manually. That's why we thought, okay, let's try to move beyond the manual analysis and try to do analysis at scale. And the idea is that this should enable investors to look at complete portfolio, for example, or companies can benchmark against other companies in the industry or companies of similar size. Regulators can get macro insights on what's going on modern slavery over the whole kind of cross-section of companies. And this is what AI enables us to do. So the idea that this kind of scalability would transform how we deal with the issue. So I'll briefly mention, we kind of developed this tool that kind of takes the statement and parse the statement using vision models so that we don't lose any images or graphs or something like that. And then we use kind of photo-point scoring elements that are developed by the investment community. It's part of what's called Find It, Fix It, Prevent It initiative that's made by lots of investors. And our tool, basically, we kind of took also this, but also some of their manual analysis that also allows us to make the model mimics what experts would do in analyzing these statements. So we provide scores, our model provides the scores and evidence, and then we have a benchmark engine that kind of benchmarks the company. Again, it's the industry that it belongs to, but also FTSE indices. FTSE indices is Financial Times Stock Exchange indices like FTSE 100, 250, 350. And then you have a feedback generator with kind of a report with overall picture, feedback, benchmark against other companies, and this report can be downloaded for use. I think I'm done. Thanks, Adriana, for giving me the opportunity to present this work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mahmoud, and thank you for bringing the conversation back to why we are here and why we need this scale. We need to be able to assess not only a couple of statements as impactful as it is, but ideally to create this transparency at scale across all the different companies that are being promoted. So how do we take methodologies such as the ones developed by Na and the other investors or other researchers and scale it through the use of AI? And we are excited for tomorrow because we are excited to learn from you on how did you build your application, the way you build the engine, and we're going to discuss all of that in more details. But we are also wanting to present a little bit some of the research that we developed here at the Queensland University of Technology. And I will be sharing my screen, if that's okay, so I can tell you a little bit more of what Hannah and Carrie and we've been working on, because we also tried to assess this question of how are we going to be able to move beyond the assessment of the modern slavery statements from a compliance level, which is what we have done so far in Project AIMS, and how we fine-tune our models, what we fine-tune our models to be able to do by developing a few more advanced methods that allow us to go in more granular within the statement. And when we posed that question, we said, well, what does it mean to go more granular? Whose methodologies shall we pick? Shall we go with the beyond compliance work that Vaso was presenting on the work of Walk3 and Wikirate? Shall we follow NAT's methodologies? Shall we look at the CCLL, the one that Mahmoud presented, or many more others that are doing the same work? They are putting a lot of effort in developing really solid methodologies in assessing these statements beyond what the requirements of the law are. So to answer that, Hannah and I and Carrie, we went and tried to map out all the different studies that are assessing the UK or Australian modern slavery statements. And then we tried to look what are the methodologies that have what are the studies that have their methodologies open source. So these are the studies that we found. We found around 23 studies that have their methodology open, but we see that of course some of their the methodologies are repeated in multiple years. The way NAS work is repeated over years, same as the beyond compliance work from WorkFree and WikiRate and so on. So we look at all these studies, we look at the methodology, and then what we do, so from this methodology, we take these 13 unique, from the literature, we take these 13 unique methodologies and we map out every single question that they're asking. The way now was presenting, you saw within each of the mandatory criteria, they're asking some specific question. And so we're doing in the other studies. But of course, some of the studies have overlapping questions. So we have 211 unique questions that all these different academics and civic society have been looking at. So what does it mean in practice is that now we have the 7 mandatory criteria. When we looked at all these different questions, we were able to give them a general topic. So now if we are interested in the 7 mandatory criteria of the law, let's say we are interested in the description of supply chain and operations, one of the criteria we talked a lot about today. Now we can go deeper in this sub-criteria and we say, actually, I have a lot more questions about the supply chain. And then we have now a lot more granular questions that we are able to ask, the 211 unique one. But if you really want to go back to the original question of each of the study, we can see that while we put those questions together to get to a more unified framework, we can still have a lot more granular metrics that we can ask. So what does this mean is that we were able to identify in this study not only the unique metrics that each of the study is asking, but also we were able to map an intersection between all these different studies. So this is the actual raw data. I hope you're able to see it. I'm not sure. Can you see a CSV that I'm sharing? All right. So here is this huge mapping that we're having for each of the mandatory criteria. This is the data behind those visualizations that we show. So within each of the mandatory criteria, we go and say, okay, for the operations, these are the more granular questions that different studies want to see. So instead of just asking, has the company described risk or incidents of modern slavery, we can go in a particular subtopic and we say that recruitment is an important question, and then we have sub-questions within the recruitment topic that different studies have looked at. And this allows us to have this comprehensive overview of very important questions that academia and the civic society are interested in. And this data is going to be made available to you tomorrow when we're going to talk about some features that we would like you to build when you're building that software. When we ask you, we want to be able to, the user to be able to interrogate a modern slavery statement. And instead of the user having to think about what questions to ask, we can provide some already generated questions, so then the user can have some inspiration where to start. So, and again, these questions are not random. These questions come from a very solid literature review from experts like Na and Mahmoud and others who have been applying their skills and, of course, the WorkFree and WikiRate methodology in designing those particular questions. So it will be important for them to be available for the different users. Now, with this work, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I'll just give you a bit of a tease for tomorrow, what we were able to do, and let me know if you're able now to see my slides again. Great. So here is how we build in our paper a methodology that allows us to take one of those questions, let's say the recruitment, how is the company describing recruitment as a risk? And then we know that that's linked to criteria 3. And we have one of our best performing model trained to identify all the information for criteria 3. And then when our model extracts all that information, it provides that as evidence to another large language model and is asking the question that we have, has the company described recruitment as a risk? And when the model outputs its answer, it gives the answer, but also a reasoning. So why is this important? Because as we heard in the previous session, we always want to have a human in the loop, a reviewer who will be able to assess the output, because many times the models reach the right conclusion, but for the wrong reason, and we need as humans to know. And if this model doesn't work, we have a watchdog model, and we're going to tell you tomorrow how this model is going to work in the appropriate session. But I wanted to show you, and I know Mahmoud will also do this tomorrow in a lot more details, how we are trying to map the relevant questions that we want to ask these statements, and then how AI can already start helping us make sense of those questions, and hoping to scale at a larger, the transparency at scale. And maybe, Hannah, I would like to ask you if you have any particular thoughts on, or that you would like to share from this work with the participants, and maybe you emphasizing a little bit more maybe on the idea of why did we need to map out all these different methodologies, and trying to move a little bit towards a synchronization of assessments and benchmark.
Oh, sure, it's a good place to pick it up. So as we heard when the first two presenters spoke about their models, everyone has a reason that they want to assess the statements. Maybe they want to be able to inform investors, and that's what we heard from now. And then maybe they want to look not for investors, but from a civil society perspective. And I think with those 13 different perspectives, many came from different communities, different industries, and they all had a different focus. So we wanted to find out what are the things that are in common across them, and then be able to make our framework based on that. We actually did some kind of a union to figure out which metrics were in common across, I think it had to be in 3 of the studies. Can't remember exactly what we put as our cutoff, because we wanted to make sure that we were reducing that big set of metrics that we found to make it something that was manageable, but also represented what was important across intersection in the union. And maybe that's like that Adriana was going to show tomorrow.
No, this is really great. So this is the final list of questions. There are at least 3 of this methodology. So remember, a lot of the methodologies are repeated every year in multiple studies. So those will be the priority questions that a lot of the academics and civil society will want to see.
And then also we wanted to go beyond compliance, because we know that one of the presenters, and it could have even been in the last panel as well, you can have a statement that complies but says absolutely nothing. You can have a statement that's 1 page long and doesn't give you very much information. It's not done in the same heart as what we're hoping from modern slavery statements. So the system itself is supposed to give support to help a company know how they can improve, like what areas are missing. If we know what areas are missing, then they know how to do better next time. We want to make sure we're raising the bar instead of just lowering that bar to just tick box.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Hannah. And again, I know today has been such a big day of learning, and I hope you're going to take your time to go through the recording. And that's why I wanted to make sure that the speakers have enough time to speak, because you can just stop the recording and really have the time to dive into everything that was said. Yes, you will get a data set tomorrow when we're going to go to the workshops, but because you have been already to this session, you can already think, I can provide the questions, but can I provide a specific visualization if a question is in the priority list? Or can I, when I show a question as a suggestion of a question for the user to ask in a chatbot, can I also show them what are the researchers or the studies or what is the methodology that this question comes from? And the user then will have a better understanding on how important that question is generally in the community. So you already have an advantage and a lot to think about in terms of how you can maybe build those interesting features in your application that will be most useful for your potential users. So, Vasu, I'd like to come back to you because, and I'm sorry again to kind of put you on the spot because we haven't talked about this, but it just clicked to me as you're presenting that we already have a really great visualization on how the data sets, how the assessment of the statements when put together can provide a really great dashboard for users. And we don't expect the participants to replicate anything. You see, we don't expect it to replicate Vasu's dashboard. We don't expect it to replicate the application that you will see from Lancaster University tomorrow or some others that we will present to you as a demo. But we want you to be inspired by them, so you see what some other people have been building, so you can get a sense of the direction that you should go to. So Vasu, with the dashboard, would you mind showing us a little bit more how you can interact with it? Or are there any features where so let's say I'm interested in a specific question or on a specific sector, then can I download the data? Can I then go back to the raw data of that particular graph?
So yeah, that's a very good question, actually. Yeah, I can show you a few of the features that we have on the dashboard. You can let me share my screen. Maybe this will be a little bit easier. So yeah, you can filter on different sectors. So the full dashboard can apply on different sectors that we have some more focused research done. And yeah, as I said before, here I'm again on the electronics sector, what people can do is also they can export specific sections on a PNG format, so they can download if they want to reuse it in a report or on a blog post, or if they want to highlight some specificities of this dashboard. Also, we allow people to filter by year and also different legislation, so they can have a more focused view of the data. So now your question, if you can go back to the research and the data on the platform, in many of those we are actually having links to, and people can go and see the data on the platform with the filter also applied on the specific sector in that case. And also we are interested on the assessed statements. So you can see here you can have all the answers on the meeting meets minimum MSA requirements. But as a side note, as I said before, how everything it is built, we have also calculated metrics. So this specific metric is a calculated metric. It's if the company meets the minimum requirements of either of the UK or an Australian Modern Slavery Act. So here we have the apple, and if you go inside, you can see some more granular view of the data. So here we can see that, okay, it meets the UK MSA requirement, but this specific report, it doesn't fall under the Australian one, so it was assessed under the UK law. And you can also go deeper on the metric, and you can see some more details of what the minimum requirements for the UK Modern Slavery Act look like and what was the answers in that case. So, and you can see also we have the formula here. So we want everything to be transparent of how that was calculated, what was the input and what was the output. So people can go and browse the data on the platform. I know it's a little bit too much. I think I have done also a small demo of how you can download data from the Wikirate platform that probably Adriana will showcase tomorrow. But yeah, if that would be interesting, I can put together also all the indicators that we have, the research one and the calculated one, and people can just browse a little bit the data on the platform, and then if they want to use any data that we have on the Wikirate platform, they can go there and they can leverage that a little bit more. But to be transparent, so the UI applies a further layer of aggregation. So we have to show some total numbers, which is not available through the platform, but it's some calculations that is done on the front end. I don't know if it is useful or not. Also, the code for the dashboard is open source, so if anyone is interested, they can also have a look there. We were using a library, it's called Vega for the visualizations. It's really straightforward. You can configure your charts in a JSON format. You just can pull the data, transform the data within this Vega configuration file. It's very easy and quick to put a visualization together. But on top of that, I think there are also plenty no-code tools out there that maybe they can be used for putting together some visualizations. And I think also these solutions can be considered in the case of this hackathon. So I don't know if Adriana answered your question or if I need to go in more detail to something additional.
No, I think this is really, really great. And thank you so much. And again, well, we hope that the participants get inspired by this. And if you don't mind sharing the link to the open source code for this, they can look into it. But again, we hope for them, we want to see their own innovation. And again, the goal is not to replicate something that exists, but how do you build on all these resources that you have learned about throughout these sessions yesterday and today, so we can move ahead considering how far behind we are in catching up with the very shocking statistics that we've learned today of modern slavery. So we need to move ahead, and then but nothing stops us from getting inspired from the existing tools. We also have a question from the audience here, and one question is about how are companies that do not comply with the law being kept accountable? A bit of this question has been answered earlier in the previous sessions, but also if any of you would like to take have a go at answering this, please go ahead, and then there is a follow-up question after that.
Adriana, I would like to add some point to answer that question. So I think the Australian the Australian government, for example, has an annual report, and in there they look at the compliance rate. So I think currently this is about more than 20%, a little bit over than 20% that are still non-compliant. But in terms of our scoring model, for example, if we say that these companies do not have very good disclosure quality, either they have E or F rating, or sometimes if we say that these companies have been downgraded, it is the investor communities that really care about that, and they do take action. So they would engage with the companies and say that, why does Monash downgrade you, or why this area of disclosure was very poor? We need you to improve your disclosure here and there. So when we engage with investors, we know that these are the conversations that they have been having with companies, and especially when investor makes decision based on company disclosures. So if there is any area for improvement, they would engage with the companies to actually demand the company to improve. Just a few examples, I would not name companies, but there were companies who in the first year of rating they got E, and there were other companies who got D, and then they were all got phone calls and engagement meetings with investors where they actually pointed out that the disclosure quality is very poor, as rated by Monash. And I remember in the first year when we didn't have the rating, but in the first year we came out with the ranking of ASX 100, and there was one company that was ranked in the bottom 10. And their CEO actually took it to the town hall meeting of the whole company and said, then we will not be able to just, it is not good that we actually were in the top 10, the bottom 10, and we have to do something about this. So ASX 100 companies are under a lot of pressure for better disclosure, especially from the investor community.
Thank you so much, and thank you particularly for bringing in some concrete cases. While not necessarily naming companies, we also have been having this particular disclaimer throughout this event that we want to make sure that the participants are really focusing here on the development of the solution. So the quality of their solution will be assessed on the technicalities and not about what claims they are going to make about companies. So we've mentioned a couple of times that they cannot make claims about companies as a result of this hackathon. So I should tell you, thank you for showing us how to be able to present the results without having necessarily to go there. But that's just a small technical detail about this particular event. But beyond that, also it's important to have these examples because we've heard quite a lot throughout today, particular also from the government, but also from the civic society, saying how unfortunately these laws are not properly enforced and they're not really reaching the goals that were initially set with the law. But then through the actions and this type of assessments that yourself and others are doing, we can see how stakeholders are able to use the results of this assessment and really drive a change within companies. And that's why it's so important that we are here and we are aiming to be able to do this type of assessment at scale using AI. And we have the second part of the question from the same participant. So what I'm understanding for the second part of this question is, well, after the PDFs are ingested and processed and the models are running, what is the end goal here? What is the human reviewer looking for? So today we already learned about different methodologies that people are using. So of course, I imagine that we would expect that different user will use different methodologies. So then they will expect that the model will be able to output those results as clear as possible. But let's in this hackathon, we will encourage the participants to focus on the assessment of the different layers of reporting that the new template that is developed by the three governments is outlining. So instead of going with a particular methodology or even with this framework that Hannah and I, we summarized by looking at the literature, we decided to focus on the reporting template as designed by the government. So the output that we will expect the models to look at and to produce will be to tell us how much of that template is covered from the statement. But beyond that, for the panelists, I would like to ask you, as a human reviewer, either let's say we're looking at your own methodology or the template or any, what will be some important features that will be useful for you if you are being aided by AI in your assessment? What would you like to see as an output from this assessment? Is it just the answer? Is it explainability? Do you want to see where in the statement the information that generates the answer is? Or what will be some interesting features that you think will be useful as a human reviewer?
I could maybe start with that one because it's something I've been doing in the last few days still. As a human reviewer, I need to be able to see how the system came up with the answer it came up with. Then you'll see when you mess with these things, often it'll get it right, but sometimes it'll hallucinate as well. So it's good to have the reasoning to see what it found and why which steps it decided or which rules it used to come to the decision it came to. And then it's good to have, if you've extracted from a portion, if it's based on a portion of the document, it's good to have that there as well. So yes, you would read through the statement itself, yes, and then you could go back and say, okay, well, that's the part that it found. Let me make sure it's actually there, and step through the logic so you can see why it came up with its opinion.
Thank you. Now, if you would have an AI solution that is perfectly designed to be able to answer all these different questions that you've developed in your methodology, how much would you rely on the AI, and where would be the places where, as a human reviewer, you would like to be involved, and what would be some of the outputs of the model that you would need to be able to make the judgments?
Yes, I think it's a wonderful question, and we are kind of dreaming of having one. Because the project that we have been running is quite resource intensive. I mean, let me explain the scoring process as well. For the human scorers, for each of the statement, we need 2 scorer, and they would score that independently. And then they would have some time to sit together to consolidate the 2 set of score. And then we have the reviewer reviewing all of those scores again. So a statement would have been through 3 pairs of eyes before we finalize it. And in order to, if we can automate that scoring process, that would be wonderful. And to be honest, we are also trying to do the same thing, but we also understand that this type of information, especially with the rating information that we release to the market, it is very sensitive information, because it can lead to further actions, and it could, if we have an error, it will be very, very, we will lose the credibility in the market. And that's why we think that even with the AI model, we really need to have a human in the loop for quality checking. But if we are to build that model, what we would be able to or would love to see, that the model has to deliver very consistent. I mean, and in our scoring model, there are questions that are very kind of black and white, very straightforward, especially like, they're just information to find whether some certain information is there, whether some disclosure, like the number of suppliers, for example. But sometimes it may not be that easy, because you can find that the number of suppliers can occur in many places and they mean different things. So the ability to know whether the information picked up by the AI tool is accurate and consistent is quite important. Even with human scorer, and even with similar training and similar background of scorers, we still see that there are discrepancies in the scorings every now and then. And that's why that consolidation process and reviewing process is quite important. And I don't know, with the AI, for example, the model that Adriana explained, there seemed to be some reviewing process built in or embedded into that process, which is very advanced, I think, because that reflects the real challenge of us as human assessor. Another thing that I would really like to be able to do, or the AI to be able to do, is to actually factor in the some other sometimes disclosure quality is a factor of so many different things, right? So it could be a sector, or it could be a size factor, or the sector, or many other factors. So whether how the model is gonna consider that, and perhaps whether the questions so let's say if the questions are not tailored to a different sectors, but whether the sector is going to have any impact or whether any bias on the way that the company statements will be scored, for example, it could also be another thing. Because in our analysis, after we look at all the score, we also do a sector review. So we present the information, we present the companies along with their sector peers as well, because we understand that even within ASX 100 companies, so size is less of an issue. They are different in size, but size could be less of an issue. But we think that a lot of other times sector information or sector specific characteristics could affect the disclosure quality.
Thank you so much. And maybe a quick follow-up question. So you talk about the discrepancies that even humans analysts have. And when we build the annotated data set, it took us a conservative estimate 1.5 years. And that's because we had also multiple annotators. And to get to a point where we got to a level of trust with the annotators and a level of inter-annotator agreement that we were happy with, it took a really long time. And that's because this task is very complex. The language we've learned throughout the sessions today, the way the statements are being written and the lingo, the legal lingo with double negations that Laureen was mentioning, all of this influence why it's so difficult even for humans to identify. So then what will be if the model can tell you a confidence level, what would be the confidence level that you'll be satisfied to say, oh, I trust the model at this point. I will only look at the cases that the models predicted under this level of confidence, considering that even between humans, we cannot go to 100% confidence level in their assessment. So what do you think, if we are to maybe be able to put a number to it, what will be a confidence level of a model that you think as a human you wouldn't assess those results, but you'll trust the model?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think with the confidence level that would help the human person in the loop looking at to understand. I think Hannah also mentioned that before about having that the explanation of how they come up to that answer, yes or no, for example, that is also important. I don't know statistically whether there is a good level of confidence, but I would say similar to the accuracy level, for example, something that passed that 75% or 80% would make more sense than just 50%. Because I'm thinking about the risk of, and there are two types of risk, right? So one is the information is there, but then the model didn't recognize it. So we are telling companies that you don't disclose that information, but in fact the information is there, and that is a very critical error, right, in terms of scoring or assessing a statement. And with that, we would not be happy to trust the tool if it's just like 50-50 chance that the assessment can be right. Yeah.
Thank you. And also just piggyback on this one, today we mentioned that one of our challenge about data is to be able to extract information from tables and graphs really well. Sebastian showed you a super complex modern slavery statement from Qantas here in Australia that had absolutely all the infographics you could imagine, and they look very pretty, but it will have been so difficult for us to be able to assess. And then that's why we want to be able to extract all the information, because not all the graphs are correctly described in text within the statement. So we cannot claim that the company is missing a reporting if that information sits in graphs. And I know, Mahmoud, you have already corrected for some of this limitation in your own application, so we're going to learn more about that tomorrow. But we would really like the participants to really focus on capturing all the information until, as Laureen said, one day we will have the legislation asking the companies to publish these reports in machine readable formats. My puppy is so excited to be the end of the day. She is really involved in this. I don't know if you can hear her, but if there are not any other questions, maybe we can take a moment to have a group picture. This is a tradition that started this morning, and we would like to make sure that all the sessions we end the same way. Also, once again, want to really thank Sebastian and John for staying awake until probably the sunrise already over there, and for all your support in making this event such a success. We haven't had any hiccups. We are in day 2 of the event. We have one more day to go before we send you on your big journey of hacking. So this wouldn't have been possible without them. So thank you so much. And I am excited to see all of you tomorrow. But please make sure that you watch the videos of the other recordings if you were unable to join. And there is one more session tonight. It will be 2 a.m. in Australia, so most of us won't be there. But for the rest, let's learn about the responsible development of AI for social good and some more interesting applications.